Could you imagine Liz and the Bluebird without music? How would you have hype moments without an OP to play as an insert song? Despite working in the background, any good show expertly uses its soundtrack to set the mood. Let's see what the vibes were like in 2025.
Nani kore? Kira kira?
Mirero. Mitsutero. Miero.
叶わぬ願いはそこに沈む。
And your winner for 2025 Best Soundtrack for Jury is Pantheon Stalking of Garderbelt Season 2. And for Public, it is Dan 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 Season 2.
I think these are some interesting results. I can't exactly say I was expecting Panty and Stalking to be the winner over here. I mean, I watched New Panty and Stalking. I thought it was very good, but I can't say that I really remember the soundtrack. Can you give me some thoughts about exactly why you think that the jury was kind of enamored with the soundtrack?
Yeah, so with New Panty and Stalking with Garderbelt, it's much anticipated series coming back, and across the board you see there's a lot of sequels that were nominated this year, but we felt that New Panty and Stalking rose above a lot of them in regards to how it was mixed with the audio compared to a lot of the other series. They had a lot of high-level DJs like Teddy Lloyd, and their expertise showed a lot of the time. And the way they were able to take tracks that were from season 1, and instead of just reusing them, they did a lot of like remixes that just sounded so good in the context of the action and the non-stop like absurdity, and it fit so well with that.
In regards to the remixing, it's been a while, like a decade and a half since we've seen or gotten Pantheon Stalking Season 1, and having the old tracks be remixed in this way and having the overall, I guess, production and feel of this new series be so similar to the old one, there's a sense of nostalgia to it, but also an excitement because of the additions that the remixes have that I think really push those pieces forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can really get the sense that New Panty and Stalking is more of the same stuff that you love, but also not in a samey sort of tired of it way, right? It's an evolution and an iteration upon it.
Another thing about the soundtrack, about just the new songs and the new tracks as well, and just maybe this is because I haven't seen season 1 in a while, but season 2 moves very quickly. Like the beats are very fast, it's very chaotic, it's very almost sporadic, and I think the way the composer and the editing for the sounds are used are very, it's almost music video-esque, where we get a lot of sounds that cut in and cut out almost, midway through tracks, and it fits the themes and ideas of the shows being so fast. And I think that is very exciting to watch, even if maybe the speed of it might not have been everybody's taste, but I think the soundtrack very much fit with how the show was made in that way.
Yeah, I just want to bounce off of that. Like, definitely I agree with all the points you're making. Like it helped add it to the energy of the series and heighten it in ways where just adds to the hype of the series returning. And yeah,
Speaking of another series that has plenty of its own hype moments, Dandadan's over here for the public. It's a Kensuke Ushio soundtrack, is that correct?
Yep.
And I think there was almost like a little bit of I hesitate to call it a controversy, but I think some people had some mixed thoughts about how the like remixes of like classical music was used in season one. I think a little bit of that comes back in season two, and then obviously you have the big moment with Hayashi, right? What are some of your thoughts on Dandadan season two?
When I think about Dandadan's soundtrack throughout both seasons, even there's a mixture of a lot of, I guess, electronic mixing, sampling going on to get that kind of hype, hip hop-ish sound that the openings and ending, it has that kind of aesthetic to it. But there's also a lot of traditional sounds because a lot of the subject of it is dealing with ghosts and past, especially in season 2, where we have whole Evil Eye and we had this whole cult with centuries in the making with all these people and that aren't in the present, and a lot of the instrumentation there fits. When I think about season 2, and I actually really like the Evil Eye part of that season. A lot of my favorite parts were when we got to dig deeper into the past, and the soundtrack there became a bit more calmer in that way, using a lot more those kind of traditional instruments that I think gave the soundscape overall an interesting texture.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it. I think that's a good point where Dandadan is this sort of, it's a mixture in a lot of ways. So it's a mixture of genres. It's like comedy, romance, horror. And, just the fact that they're dealing with aliens, which are kind of sci-fi future kind of high-tech kind of thing, combined with spirits and the more ritualistic stuff. It's interesting to see a combination of the more like techno synth elements combined with the kind of more traditional folky kind of stuff. I didn't think about that before. Was that something the jury thought of, HJ?
Yeah, definitely. Especially in the last arc of the show, where we get that mix of that grandiose orchestra along with that sci-fi flair with kaiju, mecha versus kaiju. But going back to your point about like that classical mix that we got from season 1 with William Hell's overture, we were kind of disappointed with how it was handled in the fight with all the composers, and how they just played it straight. It was very bombastic, played alongside some really amazing animation, but we were kind of wishing for more from that scene in particular. We were hoping for something like Williams Hell Overture, where Ushio kind of remixed the classical composition.
I mean, it was a big chance, right? I mean, you have all these famous composers and very notable songs that you could have pulled from. I can see how that could be a little bit of a disappointment. I kind of want to ask in general about just like the concept of soundtracks, right? So soundtracks are obviously a really big, important part of anime. They make up a lot of stuff. And, in the past, I've kind of labeled them as like cheat codes for emotions. Like a lot of the scenes and a lot of the impact you can feel is based on this kind of thing working in the background that you don't really pay attention to every single note of, but nonetheless affects how you experience a show. I just want to see if that rings true for y'all and how that's expressed in some of these soundtracks on the board.
I think in general that can come across, but to me, soundtrack, I think a common consensus when we think about sounds in anime is like, if the sound is good or in a general sense, we don't really pay attention to it because it's kind of fits with the show. It's not distracting. It's not overtaking what's happening on the screen. But I think for me, soundtracks are things that aren't necessarily always like that. So, I think of stuff like Takopi, which has a soundtrack that is very distinctly distracting in certain scenes because of the way that series plays on perspectives and which perspective we're looking at, and the biases of Takofi, the main character, kind of seeing these events unfold in a kind of distorted way, and the sound is very distracting in a very it's very happy, uplifting. There's a lot of happy and uplifting tracks in that show, even though the things happening on screen aren't like that at all, and we kind of become aware of that. But it becomes a benefit to that show where we're like really aware of the kind of unreliable narrator sense of things. And I think to me, when a soundtrack is able to do that, to like even make me more aware of it and put into contention what's happening, that's when it becomes really great. Instead of something that's more subdued and where, you know, it kind of like bleeds into what's happening. I kind of like the soundtracks that kind of force me awake, that, you know, makes me really aware of not only the visuals, but also what's happening underlying that.
No, yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't think about how it could add to that kind of discordance and the kind of shock factor that comes with a show like that.
And if I may add, in regards to like what Otaku Box was saying, it kind of just sits in your subconscious. You don't, sometimes many viewers might not be able to point out the specific thing in the soundtrack, but when they hear, like, especially with Apothecary Diaries, when you hear that leitmotif come through in specific big moments, it kind of stirs something in your emotions for these specific climactic scenes, and I think that's where Apothecary Diaries came through pretty strong, and I can see why the public appreciated that to put it up so high, and that's why what we felt with the new Gundam series as well, the ability for them to kind of call back to these the original Gundam series with such distinct musical riffs that it helped even new viewers to the franchise to be able to distinct from what was riffing from the old series or with the new sound, which kind of played into the narrative as well with the old versus the new.
Yeah, looking at this chart, it's interesting to me how highly G-Quux was for the jury side, but the public side, it's dead last. Which, you know, I'm somebody who hasn't seen much Gundam, so, you know, the ideas of like how that soundtrack is taking from things of the past, those were kind of lost on me. And, you know, maybe that has something to do with the public not, you know, rating it that highly. But I think even as a you know, newer viewer of Gundam, the one thing about G-Quux that really stood out to me was the soundtrack, even if the references were lost on me, because I think, you know, the work that both Masayuki Hasue and Yoshimatsu Terui did in the soundtrack were really great in terms of capturing the setting, because it's, you know, highly sci-fi. There's a lot of techno electro sound, but a lot of the scenes, especially earlier when we aren't doing the huge plot stuff in the second half, there's a lot of calming scenes. There's a lot of scenes where we're in the city, this really well-made, you know, futuristic city, urban scape with the it's a really interesting aesthetic, and a lot of the sounds there, they're very serene. And there's one scene that sticks out to me in episode 5 where we have the two main characters, and it's just a montage. It's like a half a minute montage, and they're just hanging out. They're like walking on the street, they're at the laundromat, and it's just this really serene music video-esque sound to it that's really, that to me sticks out to the quality of the soundtrack, where we can get some of the really high battle music, but the downtime is also scored really well and really appropriately to the setting.
That's what a lot of people don't realize. A soundtrack is largely composed of those sort of tracks that play in certain off-screen, or not off-screen, but like, you know, in those downtime moments of like exploring a city or traveling from one place to another. So it's really important that they are high quality as well.
Yeah, and in regards to that as well, like I think of Gachakuta, surprisingly very low on the jury side, but you know, it reversed on the public side very high. That soundtrack as well, to me, the downtime moments where there is downtime, I know that show there's a lot of action in that show, and especially in the second half. But in the first half, we do get to explore the more down-to-earth urban settings. A lot of the music there, I think, really fits with that kind of setting. There's the one thing that sticks out to me with Taku Iwasaki's track for that show is there's a lot of vocals in Gachakuta's overall soundscape, but the vocals aren't always lyrics. Sometimes there are lyrics, and the lyrics can add to whatever's happening, especially in a big fight. But some of the lyrics or vocals are just vocals. There's nothing really being put emphasis into the words. Like, you know, we can listen to hear what they're saying, but that's not really the important part. And the vocals become kind of a second instrument. And I think that soundtrack in particular had a lot of scenes where it's, you know, very explorative, and the vocal tracks really helped give this kind of companion-esque feel to it, where it's, even though we're just exploring and walking through the cityscape, it's very exciting because of how it's scored.
And I don't necessarily think of low placements on the jury side as like an indictment, or these are still the top 10 soundtracks that we've decided are the best of everything, which is like hundreds of different shows, right? So I think making it onto the list in and of itself is a triumphant achievement. But I want to thank you both for coming to talk to me about soundtracks.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
From producer Hiroshi Kame. We're deeply honored to receive such a prestigious award. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to fans around the world who have supported this work, as well as to the original manga author Tatsu-sensei, director Yamashiro, director Abel, Kensuke Ushio who composed the score, and all of the staff and cast who helped bring this project to life. Animation has the unique power to connect people beyond language and culture, and receiving this recognition has reminded us of that once again. We are currently working on Dandadan Season 3, scheduled to air in 2027. Being chosen and supported by so many people in this way is a tremendous encouragement for us and gives us great motivation for the future. We will continue striving to deliver stories that audiences around the world can enjoy. Once again, I would like to extend my deepest thanks to everyone who supported this project. Thank you very much.